I've been a carpenter for 31 years. I know how to build things that last, joints that hold under pressure, foundations that don't crack when the ground shifts. I thought I knew how to build a family. 2. Turns out I was wrong about one of those. My name is Gerald. I'm 63 years old, and I live in a mid-sized town in central Ohio where everybody knows your truck, and half of them went to school with your kids. When I married Donna, 16 years ago, she came with 2 sons, Marcus, who was 14 at the time, and Bryce, who had just turned 11. Their biological father, a man named Dale, had walked out when they were small. He sent birthday cards for a few years. Then even those stopped. I didn't try to replace him. I just showed up. That was my whole philosophy. Show up. Do the work. Be consistent. The same way I approached a tricky framing job: patience. Presence. No shortcuts. I taught Marcus how to drive in the parking lot of an abandoned grocery store on a Sunday morning. I sat in the passenger seat of my old Chevy and didn't grab the dash once. Even when he clipped the curb 3 times in a row, I watched Bryce's baseball games in the rain, in the mud, in temperatures that had no business being called spring. I stood in the back of the school auditorium the night Marcus gave a speech and won the district debate championship, and I cried in a way I didn't expect. The kind of crying that catches you off guard and embarrasses you. I paid for 2 college educations. Not loans. I refinanced the house twice. I didn't say a word about it. Not once. By the time both boys were grown and building their own lives, I genuinely believed that I had done something real. That the bond we had was the kind that held under pressure. I found out I was wrong on a Tuesday morning in February, in a hospital room in Columbus, when I was barely conscious and my wife was standing in the hallway talking to our sons on speakerphone. It started with a feeling I ignored. That's always how it goes, isn't it? You notice something small, something easy to wave off, and you tell yourself it's nothing because admitting otherwise is too inconvenient. For me, it was shortness of breath, then chest tightness that I blamed on a strenuous job site the week before. Then one morning I woke up at 4:15 with a pressure in my chest, so intense that I sat up in bed and couldn't figure out which direction was relief. Donna drove me to the emergency room. I told her she was overreacting the whole way there. 20 minutes after we walked through the sliding glass doors, a cardiologist was standing at my bedside telling me I was in serious trouble. The diagnosis was a severe blockage in 3 coronary arteries. One of them, he said, was almost entirely closed. He used a word I hadn't heard before, widowmaker, with the calm of someone who had said it hundreds of times, which made it worse somehow. He told us I needed emergency bypass surgery, and that the longer we waited, the higher the risk. I remember looking at Donna's face in that moment. She had gone very still. Not scared still, but determined still. The way she gets when something needs to be done and she's already mentally working through the steps. She reached across the bed rail, took my hand, and said, "We're doing this. Don't even think about anything else." They moved fast after that. I was prepped, transferred, and in the operating room within 6 hours, before they put me under. I squeezed Donna's hand and told her I loved her. She told me I was going to be fine and to stop being dramatic. She was smiling when she said it, but her eyes were shining. What I didn't know, what I only found out weeks later, was what happened in the waiting room while I was in surgery. Donna had called Marcus and Bryce as soon as we knew how serious it was. Marcus drove down from Cleveland. Bryce came up from Cincinnati. They were both in the waiting room by the time they took me back. The surgery was long. 7 hours. Donna sat in that room the entire time, barely moving, barely eating. She told me later that she'd made a decision in those first hours that if the surgery went well but recovery required money we didn't have, she was prepared to sell the house, to liquidate the savings account we'd been building for 12 years. to do whatever it took. She told Marcus and Bryce that she needed to say it out loud. I think she needed someone to hear her commit to it. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Mom, don't make any decisions yet. You don't even know if he's going to pull through." Donna said she heard the words but didn't fully absorb them at first. She thought he was just being practical, processing shock. Then Bryce said, "Seriously, if something goes wrong, you don't want to have already spent everything." She looked at them. She waited for one of them to clarify, to soften it, to say something that would make the words mean something different than they sounded. Neither of them did. What they were actually saying was, don't invest in saving him until you know the investment is worth it. Donna told me all of this 6 weeks later, when I was home and strong enough to hear it. She cried the whole time she was telling me. Not from sadness exactly, but from the particular devastation of a person who has seen something they cannot unsee. She said she stood up, walked away from both of them, found a chair in the corner of the waiting room, and sat there alone for the rest of the 7 hours. She didn't speak to either of them again that night. The surgery went well. That's what the surgeon told her when he came out at 11:40 at night. Still in his scrub cap, looking tired but steady. He said the blockages had been cleared. The bypass was successful, and that if recovery went smoothly, I had every reason to expect a full return to normal life. Donna thanked him. Then she called her sister, Linda, who drove down from Dayton to sit with her. She did not go back to Marcus and Bryce in the waiting room. I spent 4 days in the cardiac ICU. Donna was there every day. All day. She brought a blanket from home because she said the hospital chairs were designed by people who had never had to wait for anything. She read to me when I was drifting, just talking out loud from whatever book she'd brought. Not because I was absorbing it, but because the sound of her voice made the room feel less clinical. Marcus and Bryce came to visit once. Together. On the 3rd day, they stood at the foot of my bed and said the things people say, "Glad you're okay." Had us worried. "You look better than we expected." I was still on oxygen and moving carefully, but I was alert enough to notice that neither of them met my eyes for very long. I attributed it to discomfort around hospital settings. A lot of people have that. I didn't know yet what they had said in the waiting room. Recovery was slow. 6 weeks of no heavy lifting. No job sites. No driving for the first 2. I sat in the house and felt useless in the specific way that active people feel useless when forced to stop. Donna managed everything: the bills, the medications, the follow-up appointments, the modifications the cardiologist recommended for my diet. She never once made me feel like a burden. It was during that time that she told me. We were sitting on the back porch on a Saturday afternoon in late March. The kind of day that's almost warm enough to forget it's still winter. She had her coffee, and I had mine. Decaf now. One of many adjustments. She started talking slowly, and the way she does when something has been sitting in her chest for a long time and she's finally ready to let it out. She told me everything, word for word, as best she could remember it. I didn't say anything for a long time when she finished. I want to be honest about what I felt, because it wasn't what I might have expected. It wasn't rage. It wasn't a dramatic surge of betrayal. It was something quieter and in some ways worse, a slow, cold recognition. The feeling of a foundation shifting under your feet, not collapsing all at once, but settling into a new and irreversible position. I thought about the debate championship, the parking lot driving lessons, the refinance mortgage I had never mentioned to anyone. I thought about how neither of them had called me dad until they were in their 20s, and how much that had meant to me when they finally did. I thought about what they had said. Don't spend everything. What if he doesn't make it? I set my coffee mug down on the arm of the chair and looked out at the yard. The grass was just starting to come back. I said, "Okay." Donna looked at me. Okay, I heard you, I said. I just need a minute. She gave me a lot more than a minute. She gave me 3 weeks. I didn't confront Marcus or Bryce. I didn't call them. I didn't send an email laying out exactly what I knew and how it made me feel. I've seen people do that, fire off the message in the heat of it, and spend years dealing with the aftermath. That's not how I'm built. Instead, I made a phone call to my attorney. A woman named Patricia, who had handled the sale of my father's property years ago and who I trusted completely. I asked her to help me review the documents. Donna and I had the will, the property deeds, the beneficiary designations on the life insurance policy I'd carried for 22 years. It took about 2 weeks to make the adjustments. Everything was restructured to reflect the life Donna and I had actually built, and the people who had actually been present for it. Patricia asked me, Ons, if I was sure. I told her I'd never been more certain of anything in my professional or personal life. During that same period, I had a long conversation with Donna's sister Linda, who had been the one to sit with Donna through the night of my surgery. Linda wasn't surprised by what the boys had said. She told me, carefully, that she'd had concerns about Marcus for years, a particular quality he had of calculating people's value to him, of being warm when it was useful. She'd never said anything because she hadn't wanted to interfere. I appreciated her honesty more than I could say. I also quietly stopped being available. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way that would have triggered a conversation before I was ready. I just let things get busy. Donna understood. She had pulled back herself. Instinctively. Since the waiting room, the calls started in May. Marcus called first, on a Sunday afternoon, wanting to know if Donna and I were free for Mother's Day the following weekend. Donna told him we had plans, which we did. We were spending the day with Linda and her family. He pushed a little, suggesting we rearrange. Donna told him we'd see. We didn't rearrange. Bryce called the following Tuesday, ostensibly to check in, though the conversation quickly turned to the fact that he and his wife Tara were looking at buying a house, and they were a little short on the down payment. He mentioned it casually, the way people do when they haven't quite decided whether to ask directly. He was working up to something. He didn't get the chance to get there. Donna told him she was glad to hear they were looking and that she hoped it worked out. She did not offer anything further. Bryce paused on the line, clearly recalibrating, and then said they'd figure it out. I'm sure they would. Marcus called again in June. This time he wanted to talk to me specifically. Donna handed me the phone. He asked how I was feeling, how the recovery was going, whether I'd been cleared to go back to work. I answered his questions. I was feeling well. Recovery had gone smoothly. I was back on light jobs. He said that was great to hear. Then he said, Hey, listen. I've been thinking about the situation with the will. I waited. Tara and I were just wondering if you and Mom had updated anything since, with everything that happened. I said, we keep our documents current. He said, Right. Of course. It's just with everything being so uncertain for a while there. We weren't sure where things stood. I said, I think things are very clear, but I appreciate you asking. He started to say something else. I told him I had to get back to work. I thanked him for calling and said goodbye. I stood in the driveway for a moment after I hung up, listening to the neighborhood. A lawnmower running a few blocks over. A kid's bicycle bell. The ordinary sounds of a life I had almost lost. I walked back inside. The conversation I never planned to have happened in August. When Marcus drove down without calling ahead and showed up at the front door on a Wednesday morning, Donna wasn't home. She was at a garden center with Linda. It was just me. I let him in. I offered him water, which he declined. We sat in the living room, him on the couch, me in the armchair, and he looked at me for a moment, like he was deciding something. Then he said, I think you're upset with us. With me and Bryce. And I want to know why. I appreciated the directness. Whatever else I could say about Marcus. He had always been direct when pushed. I said, "Your mother told me what you said in the waiting room." He went still. "Both of you." I said, "She told me exactly what you said." He started to speak. I let him. He said they hadn't meant it the way it sounded. He said it was a moment of shock, of fear, of not knowing how to process the fact that I might not survive. He said he and Bryce had talked about it many times since and felt awful. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "Marcus, I refinanced this house twice to pay for your education and Bryce's. I never told either of you because I didn't want you to feel obligated. I drove you to practices. I sat in the rain watching baseball. I signed the paperwork when your mother and I got married and you were listed as my dependent because that's what the form asked and that's what the truth was. I did all of that because I wanted to. Not for credit. Not for a return on investment. Because I loved you." He was quiet. "What you said in that waiting room told me something." I said, "It told me how you see me. Not as someone worth saving. As an asset to be evaluated." He tried to respond. I let him again. He said it wasn't like that. He said I was being unfair. I said, "I'm not angry. Marcus, I want you to understand that. I'm clear. There's a difference." He left about 40 minutes later. I don't think the conversation went the way he expected. I don't think he came prepared for calm. I think he came prepared for a fight. And what he got instead was something he didn't quite have a framework for. Donna and I spent that September in Vermont. We'd talked about it for years, a long trip through the fall foliage. Staying at small inns. Taking our time. I'd always said we'd do it when the business slowed down. The business never slowed down. So we'd never gone. We went. We drove the whole way in the truck. The same truck I'd had for 11 years with 140,000 miles on it. And it made the whole trip without complaint. We stayed at a place outside Stowe with a wood-burning fireplace in the room and a cat that slept on the porch every morning. Donna read entire books. I watched the light change on the hills in a way I'd never had time to watch before. On the third night, over dinner at a small restaurant that seated maybe 20 people and had a chalkboard menu, Donna raised her wine glass and said, "To still being here." I raised mine. "To still being here." We talked a little about Marcus and Bryce. We talked about what the future might look like with them. Without them. Somewhere in the middle. Donna said she didn't know yet where she stood. And I told her I understood. They were her sons. The equation for her was different than it was for me. I told her the only thing I knew for certain was that I wasn't going to spend whatever time I had left performing for people who had weighed my survival and found it potentially not worth the cost. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I know. I feel the same way. Marcus and Bryce don't know about the changes to the documents. Not specifically. Not yet. They know something has shifted. The calls come less frequently now. And when they do, there's a carefulness to them, a quality of testing, probing for information. I don't give them much to work with. Linda has become a fixture in our life in a way she wasn't before. She comes over on Sunday afternoons sometimes, and the three of us cook and watch old movies, and it's simple in the best possible way. Donna has a friend from her book club, Margaret, who lost her husband 2 years ago. And the two of them have grown close in the way people do when they've both had to sit with serious fear and come out the other side. I went back to full work in July. I'm careful now in ways I wasn't before. I don't skip the warm-up stretches the cardiologist gave me. I take the medications without argument. I listen to my body instead of overriding it. My crew noticed I'd changed. Not in personality, but in pace. One of the younger guys, a kid named Theo, who's been with me 4 years, said, "You seem different." Gerald. I told him I'd had my priorities reorganized for me and it had been very educational. He laughed. I meant it. I think about what family is. More than I used to. I spent 31 years building things to last. I've torn out walls that looked solid but had no structure. I've reinforced foundations that looked cracked but only needed the right repair. You can't always tell from the surface what something is made of. You have to put pressure on it. I put pressure on my family without meaning to. I went into surgery, and I stopped being the person who holds things together. And in that absence, I found out what each person in my life was made of. Donna was made of iron and love in equal measure. Linda was made of quiet loyalty. And Marcus and Bryce. I don't have a clean answer for that. I don't think I'm meant to yet. What I know is this: I almost died in February. I had 7 hours of open heart surgery, and I came out the other side. And the first spring after that surgery, I sat on a back porch and drank coffee and watched the grass come back and felt, against all odds, profoundly grateful. Grateful for Donna, for Vermont in September, for the truck that made it there and back, for the cardiologist who used the word widowmaker without flinching and then did his job. Grateful, in a complicated and unresolved way, for the waiting room conversation I wasn't supposed to hear, because it clarified something I might have spent another decade not knowing. I raised those boys to be men. Whatever kind of men they became, that part was always going to be up to them. I did my job. I showed up. That part I know I got right.